Hi, everybody. I'm here to do a brief lecture for you around abuse reporting. We have a lot of resources in this module around sort of the ins and outs of the requirements of abuse reporting and what the laws are and that sort of thing. What this lecture does, it doesn't go over those things again. What we are doing here in this lecture is talking about kind of the nuances and the things that you need to know as a mandated reporter, sort of like, frequently asked question sort of situation. Okay, so abuse reporting basics. So if you are watching this lecture, you are a mandated reporter. The criteria for mandated reporters is the list is endless. I mean, it is so incredibly long. And the idea is that it encapsulates pretty much anybody who might possibly come into contact with somebody who might have been abused or neglected. You can imagine how many people that is. Having not gone through a formal mandated reporter training does not mean that you are not a mandated reporter. Most jobs where you're a mandated reporter should give you a form that says, I understand that I'm the mandated reporter and you have to sign it and all of that stuff. They should do that. I'm sure that every so often this step gets dropped, but you will very likely get a separate mandated reporter training in your placement and have to sign that form. I would be very surprised if you did not. Okay. So, the nitty-gritty of what a mandated reporter is and what they do is all covered in the materials in the rest of the module. And of course, it's going to be covered by the training that you receive in your placement, of course. But really, what I want to share with you today is what I've kind of learned myself about being a mandated reporter and what good practice is. And the first thing that is good practice, I find, is to inform people that you're a mandated reporter before any real personal information is exchanged. You do not have to launch into an entire speech about what you are, required to report and why, if that doesn't fit really well into the conversation that you're having. If you're having a kind of organized office-based low-key meeting with somebody, then sure, you can spend a few sentences doing that and explain exactly what mandated reporters do and what's required of them. But if you are, if you're in a more high pressure situation, there's sort of abbreviated ways to do this. The important thing to do is to make sure that the person that you're talking to knows that you're a mandated reporter, right? That's the important thing to do. For those of you who are, say, on hotlines, they should probably already know that already. Ask your supervisor about the details around this. But one thing that's not on here that you should know is if you don't have enough information to report, then you can't report, right? So let's say you're taking an anonymous call from somebody where you don't have any identifying information, you don't have a phone number, you don't know anything. You can't report anything that they tell you because there's nothing to report. There's no information that can be followed up on. You need to have some of that information. So, in that sort of situation, you would not be able to report anyway. But, if somebody starts to disclose to you, the information about themselves that is identifiable in a way that you would be able to put onto your report or in your call making your report, this is the information that I know. They told me where they live, they gave me their phone number, that sort of thing. Then you're in a different realm, right? So, pardon me. So, elder, dependent child, and domestic abuse reporting is required by law. Let me do domestic abuse reporting first. There's a reason why there's a star there. If you've gone through the materials in the module, you know that this doesn't really apply to you. This is about folks working in medical settings who are treating people with injuries, essentially. So we're talking about doctors, nurses, that sort of thing. This is not going to apply to you and except under very specific circumstances, and you will be told. But you do need to understand about elder dependent and child reporting. Um, Elders and child, I think you probably understand what the definitions of those are. Dependent would be somebody who is legally an adult but is not able to, is disabled in some way, either, mentally or physically. So that would be a dependent adult. And all of that is required by law. Elder and dependent goes to APS, child goes to CPS. So this is a big point of confusion for people. If you're a mandated reporter, that does not mean that when you go to the grocery store and you see somebody, smack a child, that you need to, call 911. It means that if you work at the grocery store and you see that happening and you know who that person is, you have their license plate number, then that's the course of your employment, right? So that being said, from a moral standpoint, I would encourage you, if you see abuse or neglect in the course of your life, from a moral standpoint, I would think that you should report, right? That is always how I encourage folks to operate. I don't think that having a bright line between what you do at work and what you do at home, that your moral stance should be different in those two places, but that's my personal opinion. The requirement is that you report in the course of your employment. That's it, right? Okay, so a lot of people also are confused about informing their employer ahead of making a report or being like, should I make a report or whatever? You don't need to do that. And an argument can be made that you shouldn't do that, because, it's not their decision to make. It's your decision to make. You're the one walking around with the information, right? So it is your obligation. If you don't report because they told you not to, it's still the fine that falls on your shoulders. It's still the jail time that you're going to serve, not them. So, the report should be done by the person who is doing the suspecting or the observing or whatever of the abuse or neglect, not by the supervisor or, whatever other person, you might consult in at work. It's your responsibility to do. Okay, so another thing that happens a lot is that folks believe that they need to have proof or that they need to kind of interview the victim so that they have, what they consider to be enough information. That is not true. That is not true at all. You only gather enough information as is readily available and needed for the authorities to understand the basic situation and to make contact with the individuals involved. Okay, that is very little information. If more information is right in front of you, then by all means give them all the information that you have. But the thing that you should not be doing is investigating. Okay, so it is not for you as the reporter to pull out details from anybody in the situation. And there's lots and lots and lots of reasons not to do that. But the top two are that you can influence the outcome of the later investigation by trained investigators, and that you can traumatize the victim, right? You can traumatize the survivor of the abuse by trying to draw information out of them when you're not trained to do that, and it is surely going to result in them having to repeat their story more than once. If they come to you and they're telling you something, don't stop them. That's disclosure. This is good social work, active listening, but you don't want to dig around, right? Having knowledge of or reasonably suspecting abuse is sufficient. That's all you need to do. So don't be like, well, this isn't enough, this isn't enough. That's all you need. You can see it, sure. If you watch it happen, fine, great. Then you have very solid stuff to put on your report. But having some knowledge of or reasonably suspecting is absolutely good enough. Okay, so I've picked a timeline here that is around adults and reporting around adults. Most of you have placements around adults. But the details of the flow chart are not super important. The bottom line is what's important. Okay, the bottom line is that if you, again, if you observe, have knowledge of, or reasonably suspect abuse, the bottom line is you need to call the appropriate agency, so APS or CPS or law enforcement if it's a emergent situation, immediately, right? Like usually it's like, you know, you have 24 hours or something like that, but you should do it right now. Okay, you because first of all, it's fresh in your mind and they have questions that they want to ask you, so you should do it right in that moment. But also because it gets the ball rolling, right? On their end, it gets the ball rolling sooner. You will very likely also have to do a written report within, you know, it kind of depends, but usually it's 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever. It kind of depends on the details of what you're reporting into what agency, but they'll be able to tell you when they take the report, you know, what form you need to do and how long you have to submit it. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to have that record of having done the report. And also, I mean, it's required that you do that, but you know, making sure that you do the written report gives a record that you have made the report. Okay. So the reason why that's really important is because sometimes, often, usually, you won't know what the resolution ultimately will be of your report. They will sometimes call you to provide more information later, or very rarely, but this also sometimes happens, to provide testimony. That's a thing that I have seen happen. It does occur. But most of the time, you will never hear another word about it. Okay, you won't know what happened. You won't know whether they investigated or they didn't investigate or what the outcome of it was. You just won't know because it doesn't pertain to you, right? So having that record is really important because, you know, if you have to make another report or God forbid something happens to the survivor because there's another issue or whatever, you want to make sure that you have that record. The other thing is, like, people are very nervous about making reports. Two things about this. It's a phone call and they're very well-trained people and they're used to dealing with people who are nervous, and you know, it's not, I can't say that I've ever made a report and felt relaxed because you're reporting something that's abuse, right? Abuse or neglect. So you shouldn't be relaxed necessarily. But that sort of sense of anxiety shouldn't stop you. I mean, not only because it's not about you, right? This is about the needs of somebody else, but because, you know, it's a legal requirement. I was nervous about it. I didn't want to. I didn't like how it felt. Doesn't negate the fact that you are required to do so legally, right? The people also think like, oh, you know, this patient told me about this thing that happened 40 years ago and the perpetrator has passed away, or whatever, right? Like it's a long time ago, the person is very far away, they're not alive anymore, whatever it is. There is no time limit on doing an abuse report, and the reason why you should, the top tippy topmost reason why you should, even when the perpetrator is no longer a threat for whatever reason, is victim services. So the information gathered from abuse reports, as it pertains to victim services is, if there's no report of it, it's very difficult for victim services, which is usually a part of the DA's office, to provide services, to the survivor. So it's really important to do that. Also, like, even if they are, say, moved away, or the survivor is, in their 30s or 40s or whatever, and is not being victimized, some types of background checks, not all, but some very vigorous types of background checks will come up with these. I've seen that happen a couple of times where a abuse report, even if it couldn't be investigated for whatever reason, it will come up, right? So and of course, the obvious one, criminal investigations, right? So you don't know what other people are out there, right? You don't know what other contexts are. You don't know what you don't know. So doing the report might inform into a criminal investigation that you didn't know about, right? So it's important to keep in mind that there's a larger picture that does not involve you. And your only job is to follow the law with regard to reporting. That is your only job. You are not requested to make judgment calls about whether you should or should not report. There are very clear guidelines about reporting, and you should follow them in all situations. So, okay, I hope that this lecture has helped you all. If you have any questions, please absolutely do shoot them over to me, and I will either respond to you individually, respond to the class, or do another video, or whatever. So thank you, and I will talk to you all very soon.